Episode 4, Sovereignty, Not Subsidy.
President-elect Donald Trump touching down in Indiana today to deliver an important message in person, telling hundreds of workers at the Carrier factory he just saved their jobs.
People are crying. I mean, they're all crying. They're so happy. They're going to have a great Christmas.
Carrier is laying off more than 600 employees in 2 groups, about 300 tomorrow and the rest right before Christmas.
It's wonderful to win, you know.
Part 1, The 2 Paths We Are Offered. We've all heard that sound before. A new factory, a ribbon cutting, a politician promising jobs, growth, a brighter future. And then, 10 years later, that same factory is empty. The jobs are gone, the politician is somewhere else, and the town is left with a hollow shell and a broken promise. We are offered 2 paths. The first path is subsidies. We're offered tax breaks, free land, training dollars, whatever it takes to get a company to build here. We compete against our own neighbors, driving our value down. The company stays until the incentives expire, then leaves for the next town that'll offer more. We're left with nothing. The second path is resignation. We watch the jobs leave, the young people leave, the main street's empty. We tell ourselves this is just how it is. The decline is inevitable. The best we can do is manage our shrinking gracefully. However, both of these paths lead to the same place, extraction. Both assume we have no power. Both assume our future is something that happens to us, not something that we build for ourselves. But there is a third path. It's the one our ancestors walked. The one that built this country. The one that took a continent of possibility and turned it into one of the most prosperous nations on earth. That path is sovereignty. Today, in Episode 4, we stop diagnosing and start designing. We lay the philosophical foundation for everything that follows. We answer the question that's been hanging in the air since Episode 1. What does it actually mean to own our own future?
Today, Carrier announcing it will keep around 1,100 jobs in Indianapolis, but not all of them, largely in return for $7 million in tax incentives facilitated by the state's governor, Vice President-elect Mike Pence.
Part 2. Why Subsidies Fail. Let's be honest about the subsidy model. Indiana has been playing this game for decades, basically my whole life. Since 2000, we've awarded over $5 billion in tax abatements and incentives to corporations. In that same period, our median wage has increased only 12% when adjusted for inflation, barely keeping pace. Meanwhile, corporate profits have doubled, tripled in some cases. We give away the store, and we're told to be grateful for what's left. Here is why incentives are a trap. Companies play states against each other. Indiana offers a deal. Ohio offers a better one. Kentucky sweetens the pot. We bid against ourselves, driving down our value into the ground. When the incentives expire, which they always do, the company leaves. They have no loyalty. They never did. They came for the handout, not because they believed in Indiana specifically. The community is left with empty buildings, broken promises, and a tax base that's been gutted.
RTV6 is taking you to Monterey, where Carrier is moving 1,400 jobs currently being held by Hoosiers in Indianapolis.
Until the company moves those jobs south. The company not hiding the fact that it can pay Mexican workers $6 an hour with benefits, about 4 times less than Hoosiers.
I've talked to economic development officials who've been doing this work for 30 years. They'll tell you off the record what they can't say publicly. It is a race to the bottom, and we're all losing. Hey there, editing Kory here. It's late and I was about to upload this video, but I need to stop for a second. Something just happened, like this week. AES, which is the utility that powers 500,000 Hoosiers in and around Indianapolis, just agreed to be bought out. $33 billion. The buyers include BlackRock, a controversial New York investment firm worth $10 trillion, a Swedish infrastructure fund, the California State Pension System, and the sovereign wealth fund of the country of Qatar. I'm sure all of those groups have Indiana's best interests at mind. Let me read you what AES said about it. The acquisition is not expected to impact customer rates. Not expected to. That is a corporate weasel word if I've ever seen one. Meanwhile, the company that will own your utility is now part private equity, part foreign sovereign wealth fund. Another layer of ownership, another layer of distance between you and the people who decide what you pay for power. Our governor, Mike Braun, was asked about it. He said that the main criterion is bringing down rates. And he's right, that should be the criterion. But here's the question that I want to know the answer to. If the goal is lower rates, why are we trusting a for-profit corporation owned by investors on 3 different continents to deliver these lower rates to us? The Indiana Democratic legislators who represent Indianapolis are sounding the alarm, as they should be. They're worried their constituents will be exploited, and they're worried that this sets a dangerous precedent. I'll tell you what sets a precedent. Every time we let another layer of ownership get stacked on top of us, while we stay at the bottom. This is what extraction looks like in real time. Not a theory, not a history lesson. A news story from this week. And it's exactly why we need Pillar 1. The other path, resignation, is also a trap. It's quieter, but just as destructive. It's the belief that nothing can change, that decline is inevitable, that the best we can do is manage our shrinking gracefully. This path shows up in towns that stop updating their zoning codes because nobody's coming anyway, schools that cut shop class because the jobs aren't coming back, young people who don't even consider staying because they've internalized the message that there's nothing here for them. I heard it in my thousands of conversations. A young woman in a small town told me everyone she graduated left. She was the only one still there, and she doesn't even know why she stayed. That's not a statement of fact. That's a statement of despair. Both paths, the subsidy path and the resignation path, share the same assumptions. We are subjects, not builders. Our fate is determined elsewhere. That assumption is a lie. Part 3. Sovereignty defined. So what is sovereignty? Not a flag, not a political slogan. It's not isolationism or protectionism. Sovereignty is the capacity to make decisions about your own future and the power to act on them. That's it. That's the whole thing. It's not complicated. It's just rare nowadays. I like to break sovereignty down into 4 different elements. The first element is ownership. You can't control what you don't own. It's as simple as that. Right now, we don't own our energy. Duke Energy owns it. AES owns it. We just pay the bill. We don't own our grain. ADM and Cargill buy it. for whatever price they set. We don't own our capital. Chase and Bank of America take our deposits and lend them out in other states. When a Duke shareholder in Charlotte decides your utility's future, you are not sovereign. When an ADM executive in Chicago decides how much your grain is worth, you are not sovereign. When a bank in New York decides your small business loan is too risky, you are not sovereign. Ownership is the foundation. Without it, nothing else matters. The second element is capacity. You can't build what you don't know how to build. Sovereignty requires skills, knowledge, the ability to actually do things, not just hire someone else to do them. That's why the Indiana Century Corps is so important. It's not just a jobs program, it's a capacity-building institution. It takes people who want to work and gives them the tools to build. Welders, electricians, reactor operators, rail layers, health aides, people who can actually do the work. The third element is infrastructure. You can't act at scale without physical systems. Rail, fiber, power, health. These are all the platforms that make collective action possible. You can't build a 21st century economy on 20th century infrastructure. You can't connect people who can't reach each other. You can't care for communities that don't have clinics. Infrastructure isn't just roads and bridges. It's the skeleton of sovereignty. Without it, we're just a collection of individuals, isolated and powerless. And the fourth element is will. You can't sustain sovereignty without belief. This is the hardest one to measure, but it is probably the most important. The stories we tell ourselves, the memory of past building, the confidence that we're not done yet. A people who believe they can build, build. A people who believe decline is inevitable, decline. This is where this episode's book comes in. Thomas Paine and the Promise of America by Harvey J. Kaye. The revolutionary spirit that runs throughout American history, and whose founding father and greatest advocate was Thomas Paine, is fiercely traced in Thomas Paine and the Promise of America, showing how Paine turned Americans into radicals, how we have remained radicals at heart ever since. Harvey J. Kaye represents the nation's democratic story with wit, subtlety, and, above all, passion. As Kaye demonstrates, Paine not only turned America's colonial rebellion into a revolutionary war, but also articulated an American identity charged with exceptional purpose and promise. Beginning with Paine's life and ideas, and following their vigorous influence through to our own day, Thomas Paine and the Promise of America reveals how, while the powers that be repeatedly sought to suppress, defame, and, most recently, co-opt Paine's memory, generations of radical and liberal Americans turned to Paine for inspiration as they endeavored to expand American freedom, equality, and democracy. Thomas Paine was the great voice of democratic sovereignty, the idea that ordinary people could govern themselves, build their own institutions, create a society that served them rather than the other way around. He wrote words that literally changed the world. We have it in our power to begin the world over again. Kaye's argument: America was founded as a sovereignty project, not just a political revolution, but a declaration that people could build things together that they could not build alone. That promise has been contested ever since, but it's still there, waiting to be reclaimed. Indiana has lost all four elements to varying degrees. We don't own our energy, our capital, our processed grain. Our skills have atrophied, our infrastructure is crumbling, and our will has been battered by decades of extraction. But here is the important part. These four elements, they can be rebuilt, one by one, together. Part 4. The 5 Pillars. So, what does sovereignty look like for Indiana today in practice? It's not one thing, it's 5 things working together. 5 pillars that reinforce each other. 5 platforms that give us the capacity to act. Let me walk you through them. Pillar 1 is energy resilience. Think about your last electric bill. You probably paid it without a second thought, but did you ever wonder where that money actually goes? If you are like most Hoosiers, it leaves the state. Duke Energy sends it to Charlotte, AES sends it to Virginia, NiSource sends it to Ohio. They own the plants, they own the lines, they own the power. You just pay for it. And they take the profit home with them. $850 million a year leaving Indiana every single year. That's money that could be fixing roads, funding schools, lowering taxes. Instead, it's dividends for shareholders who have never even set foot in Indiana. Energy sovereignty means that ends. We create a public utility authority, call it the Indiana Energy and Resilience Authority, or INERA for short. It's ours. It will answer to us, not to some shareholders in another state, not to executives in another time zone, to us, the Hoosiers. And its job is simple. Build and operate small modular reactors across Indiana. Dozens of them over 25 years, starting at Purdue, where the engineering talent already exists. Then you just spread out from there. Now, these are not your grandfather's nuclear plants. They are smaller, safer. They are built in factories and then assembled on site by the Indiana Century Corps. They are passively safe, meaning if something goes wrong, the physics fixes itself. There are no meltdowns, no evacuation zones, just clean, reliable power. The electricity they generate is not only carbon neutral, but it'll be owned by Hoosiers. The profits will stay right here. Every reactor pays a host community fee directly to the counties around where it sits. Maybe $4 or $5 per megawatt hour. For a typical reactor, that's $10 to $12 million a year, every year, for 40 plus years. That money funds property tax relief, it funds teacher salaries, it funds rural health clinics. It stays local. It's not a corporate handout, it is a community dividend. And the power itself? Clean, predictable, built to last, no natural gas price spikes, no coal ash ponds leaching into groundwater, no carbon penalties, just steady, affordable electricity for generations operated by the ICC. But that's just the beginning, because the reactors we're building don't just generate electricity, they generate possibilities. First, they are renewable. Not in the way that solar and wind are renewable. Those depend on the sun shining and the wind blowing. Renewable in the fact that these run all day, all night, in any weather. Clean, steady, reliable power for decades. Second, they solve the waste problem everyone worries about. New reactor designs can actually consume spent nuclear fuel as fuel. The waste from today's reactors becomes the fuel for tomorrow's. France already does it, Japan does it, even Russia does it. The United States stopped because of politics, not because of the science. We can start again here. So how many reactors are we talking? That really depends, because the ultimate goal is to get to 100% renewable energy basically as quickly as we can. We need to stop producing carbon, but we are not quite ready there with the renewables. So the suggestion is to use reactors as a stepping stone to get to renewable. The most amount of reactors that I imagine that Indiana would need would be around 40 or 50. And reminder, these are very small reactors. They're not big power plants like you might be imagining. So that by 2050, we can get Indiana to have more than half of its power from sources that produce zero carbon and leave behind waste that's not actually waste. It's really just future fuel for the next reactor. And once the first few are running, once the workforce is trained, once the construction crews know how to assemble these, and once the supply chain is humming, we don't stop. We build the Indiana Nuclear Fuel Campus, maybe in the Fishers-Noblesville corridor. This would include fuel fabrication, enrichment, eventually recycling. We could become the OPEC of advanced nuclear. Not by digging the stuff out of the ground. Indiana actually doesn't have any natural uranium. But by taking what others threw away and turning it into energy. Energy sovereignty means we power ourselves. It means we fuel ourselves. It means we own the whole cycle, from reactor to waste to next generation fuel. And it means that 100 years from now, when our grandchildren flip a switch, they'll still be using the power that Hoosiers built for Hoosiers. Pillar 2 is the connectivity revolution. We've been calling ourselves the Crossroads of America for as long as I can remember. It's on our license plates, it's in every economic development speech. We are proud of it. But let's be honest about what a crossroads actually is. It's where things pass through on their way somewhere else. The trucks rumble down I-65, but the cargo is not for us. The trains roll through Lafayette, but the goods are headed to Chicago. We're the highway, not the destination. Connectivity sovereignty means we stop being the pass-through and start owning the network. We start with America's first high-speed rail, built and operated here in Indiana. This isn't the slow trains that crawl through at 30 miles an hour. This is real rail, electric, double track, 200 miles per hour, connecting Indianapolis, Lafayette, and Kokomo in 30 minutes. Imagine living in Kokomo and working in Indianapolis. Imagine your kid going to Purdue and them coming home for dinner on a Tuesday. Imagine your grandparents in rural Indiana making it to the city for a doctor's appointment and back home the same day. That isn't some fantasy. That's what high-speed rail does. That's what other countries are already doing. It turns a region into a neighborhood. And then we expand. Up to South Bend, down to Evansville, connect to Fort Wayne, eventually Chicago, Louisville. This is how we turn Indiana from a crossroads into a vital hub, a network that connects Indiana to the Midwest, built by Indiana, owned by Hoosiers. Second, we build fiber, running right along the tracks. Every mile of rail we lay, we string high-quality fiber optics. Even if we're not using it right away, we can lay what's called dark fiber and then utilize it later. It's way more efficient to just do this as we're building train tracks. This would be state-owned, public utility. Not owned by Comcast or Spectrum, not some monopoly charging you $100 a month for spotty service. We're talking about public fiber optic, owned by the people who actually use it. For rural communities that have been stuck with dial-up or satellite or nothing at all, this is transformational. Your kid can do homework without driving to the public library parking lot. Your small business can compete in markets that you could never reach before. Your grandparent can video call you without the call dropping every 5 minutes. The third part of this pillar are the high-speed rail stations themselves. The idea is not just to build platforms with ticket booths, but to make these mixed-use development. Apartments above, shops below, lots of green spaces, bus lines or local light rail connecting. This is a new main street for towns that lost theirs decades ago. Connectivity sovereignty means you're not just passing through anymore. You're home, you're connected, and you are part of something bigger. Pillar 3 is agricultural renaissance. Indiana grows $35 billion worth of food and fiber every year. Corn, soybeans, wheat, hogs, poultry. We're one of the top agricultural states in the country. But here's what they don't put in the brochures. We ship most of this out raw. The corn goes to Illinois to get turned into ethanol. The soybeans go to Iowa to get crushed for oil. The hogs go to Nebraska to get processed into pork chops. The value, which is the processing, the manufacturing, the profit, happens somewhere else. Someone else adds the value. Someone else keeps the profit. We're left with the commodity price and the hope that next year's harvest might be better. Agricultural sovereignty means that changes. We start with farmer-owned processing co-ops. You own the grain, you own the mill. You raise the livestock, you own the slaughterhouse. You produce the milk, you own the creamery. The value stays with the people who did the work, and the money stays circulating in Indiana. We start with hemp. It's a crop Indiana used to grow, and it's making a comeback. Not just for rope and textiles like the old days, but for advanced materials, for construction, insulation, bioplastics. We build regional processing hubs where farmers bring their crop and then leave with product, not just a small check. Then we expand. Identify preserved grains, non-GMO corn, specialty soybeans. If a buyer wants a specific variety, we grow it. We process it here. We brand it. We could create the Indiana Premium brand. Food and fiber grown, processed, and manufactured here, carrying a mark of quality the world recognizes and pays more for. You'll see it on shelves. You'll know what it means. Next is the Hoosier Heritage Land Trust. This is how we keep farmland in family hands. We don't want it sold off to developers or bought up by foreign investors. We want it to be passed down to the next generation of Hoosier farmers. Followed by the Indiana Carbon Bank. A lot of people don't realize that crops, the soil, the leaves, they absorb carbon. And there's a way to make this profitable for the farmers, especially if they start rotating a carbon negative crop like hemp into their rotations. We would be able to pay farmers for the carbon they sequester in their soil, essentially making a new crop, sequestration, with a new buyer, the state. This makes a new revenue stream for the people who stewarded the land the entire time. This would allow us to have an Indiana grain reserve. Do you know how every other country in the world manages its grain supply? They treat it like the strategic asset it is. Canada has a Canadian Wheat Board. Australia has a system. Even the US used to do it differently. The idea is very simple. Instead of farmers being forced to sell at harvest when prices are lowest, instead of being price takers for a global commodity market that couldn't care less if the farmer made rent this month, the state helps manage the supply, a farmer-owned reserve. When prices are low, grain goes into storage. When prices are high, it comes out, not as a giveaway program, as a price stabilization tool. This is a shock absorber for a system, as a way to ensure that the people who feed us don't get crushed by forces that they cannot control. Purdue studies have shown that government-managed stocks can reduce annual price variation by 25%. 25%. That's the difference between a farmer making it through the year and losing the farm. The Indiana Grain Reserve doesn't replace the market. It gives farmers the same tool every other industry has, the ability to wait for a fair price instead of being forced to take whatever they're offered the day the bill comes due. Agricultural sovereignty means the farmer in Tipton County keeps the value, not the trader in Chicago. It means your children have a reason to stay. It means when you drive through rural Indiana, you see working farms, not empty towns. Pillar 4 is health and compassion. When someone in Indiana gets sick, someone in another state makes money. Sadly, Indiana has lost rural hospitals in recent years. Fayette Regional Health in Connorsville, Ascension St. Vincent Dunn in Bedford, IU Health Blackford stopped inpatient and emergency services. More hospitals are on the brink in our state. The ones that remain are often owned by out-of-state corporations, Ascension in St. Louis, Community Health Systems in Nashville. They're not here to care for you. They are here to extract from you. And when the hospital fails, what happens to that building? Usually nothing. It sits empty, a monument to extraction. Health sovereignty means we stop being a revenue stream and start being a community. I argue that Indiana needs a hospital receivership authority. We can just simply create it. When a hospital fails, when the corporation owner pulls the plug and just walks away from our state, the authority steps in. They don't bail out the shareholders. They take over the building. They restart the services. They keep the doors open. We don't wait for another corporation to ride in and hopefully save the day, because we know how that plays out. That is exactly how we got here. Instead, we just do it for ourselves. The building becomes a public asset. The staff, the nurses, techs, custodians, they become public employees. The services become community services. No private equity firm skimming for profits. No out-of-state board deciding your town is not profitable enough to deserve a hospital. And we connect it to the rest of the system. The hospitals become a rural health hub, co-located within the high-speed rail station area. This is primary care, dental, mental health, pharmacy, all in one convenient place. It's accessible by train, by bus, by foot, by car. If you need a specialist, you take the train to Indianapolis or Lafayette or Evansville and come home the same day. No overnight stays, no braving the interstate, no taking time off work, no navigating a system designed to confuse you. The next part is one that I really enjoy. It's called the Clinic in a Van Fleet. Indiana could simply build 250 electric mobile units, staffed by trained ICC Resilience Corps members, blanketing all 92 counties. If you can't get into a clinic, the clinic comes to you. These could be parked at schools, churches, community centers. No appointments, no insurance questions, just care where it is needed. And what about our furry friends? I would love to see an Animal Stewardship Corps as part of the Indiana Century Corps, because animal health is public health. Here's the thing. A 1% fee on non-essential pet products, fancy toys, boutique treats, the stuff you don't really need but buy anyway for your pets, that could fund low-cost spay and neuter centers, veterinary care for families who can't afford it, and the human connections that come from caring for something together. Think about it. When you take your dog to a low-cost clinic, you meet other pet owners. you talk, you connect, you become part of something. That's not just animal welfare, that's community infrastructure. Health sovereignty means your community's health isn't a line item on a Nashville hospital's balance sheet. It means if a hospital fails, we do not let it rot. We take it over. It means care comes to you when you need it most. It means your pet's health and your health are part of the same system. It means when you're sick, you are not alone. And finally, Pillar 5 is the funding flywheel. Now, none of this happens without money. You know that. I know that. So let's talk about where the money comes from. Because here's the thing about the Indiana Century Project. It is not funded by raising your taxes. It's funded by capturing value that's already leaving the state and putting it to work for us. We start with out-of-state truck tolls. Every day, thousands of trucks barrel down our interstates, wearing out our roads, contributing to congestion, and paying almost nothing for this privilege. Most of them are registered in other states. Their cargo is headed somewhere else. They're using Indiana infrastructure to move goods that do not benefit us. So for these out-of-state trucks, we simply charge them 12 cents a mile. That's it. It's a fraction of what they'd pay on the East Coast. It would generate $150 to $200 million a year, and it comes from out-of-state trucks, not from you. Next is cannabis. Indiana is surrounded by legal weed. Illinois made $400 million last year from Hoosiers crossing the border. Michigan too. We are funding their schools, their roads, their pensions with our money. And whether you want to admit it or not, a very large percentage of this state is already using the stuff. The answer is simple. We legalize, regulate, tax. 15% at wholesale, plus sales tax. At maturity, that's $300 to $400 million a year, maybe more. And we constitutionally lock it so it can't be rated for pet projects by some future politician. The next source of revenue I mentioned last episode, and it's called the host community fees. Remember the reactors in Pillar 1? Every one of them pays a fee to the county where it sits. $4 to $5 per megawatt hour. For a typical reactor, that's $10 to $12 million a year over 40 years. That's nearly $500 million per county. That money funds property tax relief, schools, rural health clinics, and animal welfare. It's not a corporate handout, it's a community dividend. So those are the revenue streams. Truck tolls, cannabis, host fees. They are the fuel. Now, let's talk about the engine. Did you know Indiana does not have a state bank? We used to, back in the 1930s. It was extremely popular and successful. We'll talk about that in a later episode when we talk about banking. But for today, we need to aim for the Bank of Indiana, a state-owned bank, just like North Dakota has had for over 100 years. This is not a radical experiment. It is a proven model that's worked for North Dakota since 1919. Here is how it works. The state collects taxes. This money has to be saved somewhere. Right now, the state is depositing this money in Chase or Bank of America. Instead, we want to deposit it in our own bank. This is an easy $2 billion to start. Then, local governments can deposit their money. Eventually, down the road, you would also be able to deposit yours if you choose. And that money doesn't just get shipped off to Wall Street to fund skyscrapers in Manhattan. It gets lent here at 3 to 4% interest to Hoosier small businesses, to Hoosier farmers, to Hoosier home buyers, to Hoosier towns building infrastructure. And this part's vital. A state bank would not compete with local banks. It would partner with them. The Bank of Indiana wouldn't take deposits from your local community bank. It doesn't steal their customers. It does what the Bank of North Dakota does, which is makes them stronger. When a local bank needs liquidity to make more loans, the Bank of Indiana could provide it. When a loan is simply too big for a community bank to handle alone, maybe a factory expansion, a major farm purchase, a town infrastructure project, the Bank of Indiana could participate alongside them, sharing the risk and keeping the loan local. When a community bank wants to offer mortgages or student loans but doesn't have the capacity, the Bank of Indiana provides the back-end support. We create a loan participation market where small banks can sell portions of their loans to the Bank of Indiana, freeing up capital to make more loans. We offer correspondent banking services, stuff like check clearing, wire transfers, treasury management, at cost, saving community banks thousands per year. We provide secondary market access so your local lender can offer competitive rates without taking on all the risk. And when a farmer needs operating capital at planting time, the Bank of Indiana funds the local ag lender who knows the farmer by name. When a young couple wants to buy their first home, the Bank of Indiana provides the mortgage backing that lets the local credit union say yes. When a small town needs to build a sewer plant, the Bank of Indiana could buy the bonds so the project moves forward. The Bank of North Dakota has done this for 106 years. It's consistently rated one of the healthiest banks in the country. It has returned billions to the state treasury, and North Dakota is tiny compared to Indiana. On top of that, North Dakota has more community banks per capita than almost any other state, because the state bank helps them thrive instead of letting the big national chains swallow them whole. That's the model. The Bank of Indiana would not compete with local banks. It would complete them. And this would allow us to have an Indiana Future Fund, a sovereign wealth fund capitalized by the revenue streams I just mentioned: truck tolls, cannabis, host fees, and by the Bank of Indiana's profits. The target is $100 billion in the state of Indiana Bank by 2050. Think about what that means. $100 billion invested, earning returns, owned by the people of Indiana. The earnings from that fund pay for permanent property tax relief. They could pay for a birth grant. We could give $5,000 to every Hoosier born in the state that will collect interest and simply be given to them when they turn 18. These revenue streams pay for the things we need without taxing the people who live here. Finally, we need to talk about constitutional locks. This is actually the part that matters the most, because we've seen this before. Somebody builds something good, and 20 years later, a legislature raids it to balance a budget. So we lock it. A constitutional amendment here in the state of Indiana requiring 60% voter approval to sell any of the assets, to change the revenue allocations, or to privatize the bank. That means these assets belong to us permanently. No future governor can undo what we build. No future legislator can raid the fund. The only way to change it is to convince 60% of Hoosiers to vote against their own interests. Funding sovereignty means our money works for us, not against us. It means every truck that passes through pays for the roads that it wears out. Every cannabis purchase funds small business loans. Every reactor pays dividends to the community that hosts it. It is a closed loop, a flywheel, and once it starts turning, it never stops. Part 5. The Integration. Now, you might look at these 5 pillars and think, that's a lot. Why not just pick one and do it well? And that's because they don't really work alone. They work better together. The reactors in Pillar 1 power the trains in Pillar 2. The trains in Pillar 2 carry the fiber that connects the farms in Pillar 3. The farms in Pillar 3 grow food that feeds patients in Pillar 4's health hubs. The health hubs in Pillar 4 employ graduates from the Indiana Century Corps. The Corps builds the next reactors. We will discuss the 5 pillars more in detail in future episodes, and we will specifically focus on how all 5 of them interact with each other and strengthen each other. For example, the truck tolls and cannabis revenue capitalize the bank in Pillar 5. The bank lends money to build the reactors and the trains and the processing plants. The host fees from the reactors flow back to the communities. The future funds earnings pay for tax relief and birth grants. Energy, connectivity, agriculture, health, and funding. A closed loop, a flywheel. Each turn makes the next turn easier. This is what sovereignty looks like for Indiana. Not a collection of programs, an integrated platform for building. And it's how we stop being a crossroads and start being a capital. Part 6. Objections and Responses. I sincerely want the Indiana Century podcast to be an open conversation with anyone that wants to talk about these 5 pillars and what they mean. But before we go further, let me name some of the objections, because they'll come up, they always do. Objection 1. This is socialism. No. Socialism is when the state owns everything and individuals own nothing. This is the opposite. This is about individuals having the capacity to build, which requires that we own the platforms together. The railroad doesn't belong to the government, it belongs to us. The power plant doesn't belong to a distant corporation, it belongs to us. There's a difference between public ownership for common benefit and state control for its own sake. Next objection. This is too expensive. The question isn't, can we afford it? It's, can we afford not to? We're already spending billions on extraction, on utility bills that leave, on healthcare premiums that leave, on grain that leaves, on bank deposits that leave. Sovereignty is not a cost. It is a recapture of value that is already ours. Objection 3. Government can't run things efficiently. The nuclear navy would like a word. So would the Bank of North Dakota. So would every rural electric cooperative that's kept the lights on for 80 years. The question is not public versus private. It's ownership versus extraction. A well-run public entity that answers to the voters is far more accountable than a private monopoly that answers to shareholders in another state. And the final objection, this will never happen politically. Maybe, but too hard is not an argument against what is right. And the people who built the interstate highway system, the people who won World War II, who put a man on the moon, they didn't ask, is this politically possible? They asked, what does the future require? And then they built it. Sovereignty is not a party. It's not even left versus right. It is forward versus stuck. Part 7. The Choice. We've spent 3 episodes diagnosing what's broken. The crossroads trap, the loneliness of a broken system, the extraction of $5 billion per year. Today, we named the alternative, sovereignty, not subsidy. This is not begging for someone else to build here. We're going to build ourselves. This is not accepting that our kids have to leave. It's giving them a reason to stay. This is not watching our towns hollow out. It's filling them again with purpose, with work, with each other. Thomas Paine wrote, "We have it in our power to begin the world over again." That's not just a quote. It is a challenge to every one of us. It is what every generation that built something lasting has believed. Indiana has it in our power to begin again. And we don't have to do it from scratch. We can do it from strength, from the memory of what we built before, from the skills we still have, from the will that we are rediscovering. The 5 pillars are the plan, but a plan without people is just paper. That's why, over the next several episodes, we're going to go deep on each pillar. We're going to show you how they work, who builds them, who pays for them, and who benefits. We're going to make the case so thoroughly that by the time we reach episode 13, the Hoosier Mandate, you will be ready to sign your name. Before we go, I want you to do something. This week, think about one thing in your life that you wish you owned, but don't. Your power bill, your health care, your internet connection, your bank. Ask yourself, what would it take to own it? What would change if you did? That's sovereignty. It may sound weird because we're not used to it, but it's not abstract. It is deeply personal, and it starts with asking that question. Next week, we go deep on Pillar 1. In Episode 5, Atoms for Prosperity, small modular reactors are explained simply. No scare words, just the truth about how we power Indiana's future. I'm Kory. This is the Indiana Century Podcast. And remember, sovereignty isn't given, it's built.